the while. The doctor was about to fire, and in the excitement of the moment I had my piece to my shoulder, but before he had come half way the savage turned and staggered back, Ti-hi pointing triumphantly to an arrow sticking deep in the muscles of the man's shoulder. There was a loud yelling as the wounded savage rejoined his companions, and our own men set up a triumphant shout. "That's one to us," said Jack Penny dryly. "I think I shall keep the score." The doctor looked at me just at this time, and I looked back at him, and somehow I seemed to read in his eyes that he thought it would be the best plan to let the blacks fight out the battle with their bows and arrows, and I felt quite happy in my mind for the moment, since it seemed to me that we should get out of the difficulty of having to shed blood. But directly after I coloured with shame, for it seemed cowardly to want to do such work by deputy, and to make these ignorant people fight our battle, while after all I was wrong, for the doctor was not thinking anything of the kind. In fact, he knew that we would all have to fight in defence of our lives, and when a flight of about 20 arrows came whizzing and pattering over our heads and hurtled down upon the stony floor, I knew it too, and began to grow cool with the courage of desperation, and prepared for the worst. "Here, Jack Penny," I whispered, "you'll have to fight. The savages mean mischief." "All right," he replied in a slow, cool, drawling way. "I'm ready for them, but I don't know whether I can hit a man as he runs, unless I try to make myself believe he's a kangaroo." The yelling was continued by our enemies, and as far as I could tell it seemed to me there must be at least 30 savages hiding amongst the rocks and trees, and all apparently thirsting for our blood. "It seems hard, doctor," I said bitterly. "They might leave us alone." "I'm afraid they will think that they would have done better in leaving us," said the doctor gloomily, "for I don't mean them to win the day if I can help it." I could not help staring at the doctor. His face looked so stern and strange until, catching my eye, he smiled in his old way and held out his hand. "We shall beat them off, Joe," he said gently. "I would have avoided it if I could, but it has become a work of necessity, and we must fight for our lives. Be careful," he added sternly. "It is no time for trifling. Remember your father, and the mother who is waiting for you at home. Joe, my boy, it is a fight for life, and you must make every shot tell." For the moment I felt chilled with horror, and a sensation of dread seemed to paralyse me. Then came the reaction, and with the thought that if I did not act like a man I should never see those I loved again. This too was supplemented, as it were, by that spirit of what the French call camaraderie, that spirit which makes one forget self, and thinking that I had to defend my two companions from the enemy, I raised the barrel of my piece upon the low breastwork, ready to fire on the first enemy who should appear. "Look!" said Ti-hi just then, for he was picking up scraps of our tongue, and following his pointing finger I made out the black bodies of several savages creeping to posts of vantage from whence they would be able to shoot. "Take care," said the doctor sternly, as an arrow nearly grazed my ear. "If one of those arrows gives ever so slight a wound, it may prove fatal, my lad. Don't expose yourself in the least." "Ah, the game must begin in earnest," he said, partly under his breath. As he spoke he took aim at a man who was climbing from rock to rock to gain the spot from which the other had been dislodged. Then there was a puff of white smoke, a roar that reverberated amongst the rocks, and the poor wretch seemed to drop out of sight. The doctor's face looked tight and drawn as he reloaded, and for a moment I felt horrified; but then, seeing a great brawny black fellow raise himself up to draw his bow and shoot at the part where Jack Penny was crouching, and each time seemed to send his arrow more close to my companion, I felt suddenly as if an angry wave were sweeping over my spirit, and lay there scowling at the man. He rose up again, and there was a whiz and a crack that startled me. "I say," drawled Jack Penny, "mind what you're after. You'll hit some one directly." He said this with a strange solemnity of voice, and picking up the arrow he handed it to one of the blacks. "That thing went right through my hair, Joe Carstairs," he continued. "It's making me wild." I hesitated no longer, but as the great savage rose up once more I took a quick aim and fired just as he was drawing his bow. The smoke obscured my sight for a few moments, during which there was a furious yelling, and then, just as the thin bluish vapour was clearing off, there was another puff and an echoing volley dying off in the distance, for Jack Penny had also fired. "I don't know whether I hit him," he answered, "but he was climbing up there like t'other chap was, and I can't see him now." In the excitement of the fight the terrible dread of injuring a fellow creature now seemed to have entirely passed away, and I watched one savage stealing from bush to bush and from great stone to stone with an eagerness I could not have believed in till I found an opportunity of firing at him just as he too had reached a dangerous place and had sent his first arrow close to my side. I fired and missed him, and the savage shouted defiance as my bullet struck the stones and raised a puff of dust. The next moment he had replied with a well-directed arrow that made me wince, it was so near my head. By this time I had reloaded, and was taking aim again with feverish eagerness, when all at once a great stone crashed down from above and swept the savage from the ledge where he knelt. I looked on appalled as the man rolled headlong down in company with the mass of stone, and then lay motionless in the bottom of the little valley. "Who is it throwing stones?" drawled Jack slowly. "That was a big one, and it hit." "That could not have been an accident," said the doctor. "Perhaps Aroo is up there." "I only hope he is," I cried. "But look, look! What's that?" I caught at the doctor's arm to draw his attention to what seemed to be a great thickly tufted bush which was coming up the little valley towards us. "Birnam Wood is coming to Dunsinane," said the doctor loudly. "Is it?" said Jack Penny excitedly. "What for? Where? What do you mean?" "Look, look!" I cried, and I pointed to the moving bush. "Well, that's rum," said Jack, rubbing his finger with his nose. "Trees are alive, of course, but they can't walk, can they? I think there's some one shoving that along." "Why, of course there is," I said. "Don't fire unless you're obliged," exclaimed the doctor, "and whatever you do take care. See how the arrows are coming." For they were pattering about us thickly, and the blacks on our side kept sending them back, but with what results we could not tell, for the savages kept closely within the cover. It was now drawing toward evening, and the sun seemed hotter than ever. The whole of the sultry ravine seemed to have become an oven, of which our cavern shelter was the furnace. In fact, the heat was momentarily, from the sun's position and in spite of its being so long past the meridian, growing more and more intense. Jack Penny had of late grown very silent, but now and then he turned his face toward me with his mouth open, panting with heat and thirst as uneasily as his dog, whose tongue was hanging out, looking white and dry. "Is there any water there?" said the doctor suddenly, as he paused in the act of reloading. "Not a drop," I said dismally. "Oh, don't say that!" groaned Jack Penny. "If I don't have some I shall die." "It will be evening soon," said the doctor in a husky voice, "and this terrible heat will be over. Keep on firing when you have a chance, my lads, but don't waste a shot. We must read them such a lesson that they will draw off and leave us alone." But as he spoke, so far from the loss they had sustained having damped the ardour of the enemy, they kept on sending in the arrows more thickly, but without doing us, thanks to our position and the breastwork, the slightest harm. The sun sank lower, but the rock where we were seemed to grow hotter, the air to be